Hi, I'm Adam Natali, Director of SVA Theater at the School of Visual Arts. If you've never heard of SVA, we're a preeminent art and design college in New York City. Check the description below for more info. Since 2014, SVA Theater has hosted After School Special, the college's annual alumni film and animation festival. The festival is normally a series of free screenings followed by Q&As with alumni who are successfully working in the film industry. Even though we're unable to host in-person screenings this year, we're thrilled to be able to present interviews with over 25 alumni who've worked on a wide variety of feature films, television shows, documentaries, animated films, and more. Whether tonight's Q&A focuses on a particular series, film, or other work, we'll be sure to note it in the description below and will provide info on how to watch. All of our festival interviews will premiere here on YouTube during the week of September 21st. We're calling this our work from home edition of After School Special, and our guests are zooming in from all over the world, from Singapore and Germany to Canada and California. A full schedule of After School Special 2020 interviews can be found at svatheater.com, but all videos will remain on YouTube following their premieres. I hope you enjoyed tonight's interview, and if you're interested in viewing past After School Special Q&As, you can visit the School of Visual Arts' YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in, and fingers crossed, we hope to see you in person at an SVA Theater event in the near future. I'd like to welcome Cal Peternell. Cal grew up on a small farm in New Jersey and earned a BFA in Fine Arts from SVA in the late 80s. Living in Italy with his wife, artist Kathleen Henderson, Cal was inspired to pursue a cooking career. After working at various acclaimed restaurants in San Francisco and Boston, including Bix, Loretta Keller's Bizou, Lydia Shire's Biba, and Chris Schlesinger's The Blue Room. There's an affinity for bees there, I think. He landed at Alice Waters' famed Chez Panisse in Berkeley. He moved on to the seas at that point, Chez Panisse, where he stayed for over 20 years. And I actually just learned that he would have been the chef when I ate there some years ago. Cal has written 3 cookbooks, including 12 recipes, a recipe for cooking, and the James Beard Award nominated almonds, anchovies, and pancetta. Cal's podcast, Cooking by Ear, features exciting kitchen guests, mainly from the film world, so there is a film connection here. And those guests have included Frances McDormand, the director Mira Nair, and Alexander Payne. Cal and his wife have 3 sons and live in the San Francisco Bay Area where he is now. So I'm so pleased to welcome Cal Peternell. Hey Cal, how are you?
Hey, good. Feeling better now. The smoke is starting to clear out of the air here.
Well, that's good. I know,
Yeah.
we're living through 2020. It hasn't been a great year, but this is a little bit different for our festival. Not only is it online, but you're our first guest. This is I think the 7th year of the festival, and you're our first guest who has worked in the culinary arts and works in the culinary arts. So thank you for being here. I'd first like to start by talking about your experience in the fine arts, though. You actually went to SVA for fine arts and more specifically painting. So can you talk about how you landed there and your SVA experience on the whole?
Sure. Grew up in New Jersey, always loved New York, and would travel in there growing up. And then I started school at Boston University, but after 2 years decided to take a year off and look into transferring. And, SVA just got me excited because it's in New York, and it seemed so like the curriculum and the art world of New York were very integrated, so that I could study with painters whose shows I could go see. At that time, they were showing in Soho and East Village. And that's what attracted me there, and also the diversity of art practices that were available there. I was doing kind of a lot of printmaking and photography, and it lived up to all those expectations, I have to say.
And so what was next after graduation? I don't think you immediately went into cooking, but sort of how did you make that transition?
Yeah, I had always worked in restaurants through school, but as a front of the house, as a waiter or bartender. and graduated and was working as an artist assistant for a guy named Peter Reginato, a sculptor who had a loft in Soho. I was also working as a substitute teacher, which having a BA allowed me to, they were doing a temporary teaching license. You didn't need a teacher certificate at the time. All you needed is a BA in any subject. So I started working in the New York public schools as a substitute teacher, and was also working as a waiter in a restaurant that's now gone, but was beloved, called Aggie's on McDougal and Houston. And then my wife and I had friends who were moving to Italy, and they asked us if we wanted to join them, and we didn't really hesitate. And we went there, and we were still making art. In fact, we had a business as doing some art restoration, and we were, making our own paintings and drinking wine and walking through the hills. And then after a while, the money ran out. We came back here, and I decided to make the jump. We felt like New York was going to be a little too fast-paced after the Tuscan hillsides, so we came to the West Coast, and went around to restaurants and said, I don't have experience, but I'm a quick learner. And eventually someone gave me a shot. And, I never looked back, although I still do make paintings and art occasionally, including for my cookbooks.
And we'll definitely take a look at your art around the house or give us a little tour at the end. But that's a really interesting story. It wasn't like you went back to culinary school or anything.
Right.
But so, you progressed through all of these different kitchens that I named, and then you landed at Chez Panisse, where you were for quite a long time. So can you give us a brief overview of your experience at Chez Panisse?
Sure, yeah. I have to credit my wife with urging me to get the job at Chez Panisse. I was, at the time we had one young son and the second one was on the way. I was working a lot at another restaurant and just feeling like I wasn't really being a great sous chef at that restaurant, and I wasn't doing it. I was doing too many things and none of them that well. And one day we were out shopping, she dropped me off, or we pulled up in front of Chez Panisse. We were going to go to the store across the street, the legendary Cheese Board. And so I said, you can't park here. This is a loading zone. And she said, I'm not parking. I'm dropping you off. Like, go in and get a job. You're great. And they're going to love you there. And I did, humbly. She drove away. And I went in.
You were trapped.
And they were like, well, come back next week and do a tryout. And after a couple of those, I had to cook a lunch. Tryout lunch was the protocol then. And so I cooked the lunch for Alice Waters and some of the other chefs. Very nerve-wracking, but they liked it. And, that place is amazing. It really is a place that's full of individuals who are so passionate about the work that they do and respect for the amazing produce and other foodstuffs that we have in the Bay Area. And like, I kind of knew right away I had found my home, and I was there for, I started as a line cook. I became the sous chef in the cafe, then the chef in the cafe, made lots of amazing friends who I still have, lots of connections with farmers all over the greater Bay Area. Eventually I was the chef in the cafe, and then at the end of my time there, I was the chef in a downstairs restaurant. And I left there, I think, like 3 years ago.
And I mean, just so everyone is aware, I mean, Chez Panisse and Alice Waters specifically are, it's one of the restaurants that's credited for the farm to table movement. And so, it's on the forefront in many ways in making the sort of food culture that we have today in the country. So it must have been an incredible experience. It's an incredible place, and I encourage everyone to check it out. I think
it's not an exaggeration to say that, if you have a farmer's market near you, Alice is somewhat responsible for that being there. She really was essential in promoting farmers markets, and does amazing work and important work with with kids in schools with her Edible Schoolyard Foundation, and trying to create a way for education to include gardening and food and cooking and awareness around food, and to also give every child who goes to school a free lunch.
That's great. I mean,
Yeah.
the work that she's done, and you, I'm sure, were a part of that too. It must have been an incredible experience. So then, you haven't been there 3 years, but during the sort of tail end of that tenure and for the past few years, you've put out 3 cookbooks. So I want to show the images of those cookbooks briefly, and you can give us a little bit of a description of each one. So the first one is 12 recipes.
Yep. That's one, that was my first book. I was still the chef in the cafe, I think, when I started that. And I started writing that because my oldest son was leaving to go away to school. And before he left, he said, this summer, let's cook the repertoire, all my favorite dishes that we cook at home. Not restaurant dishes, but just like home cooked, stuff he loved, roasted chicken and pastas and salads. And we did, but he got to school and he started calling me, which I was glad to hear from him and glad to hear that he was cooking. But I started to think, I should put together a little, just like a family book and I thought I'll just start with 12 recipes, things that you could put together to make meals. And as I started, I thought, this is a book that he's not the only one who needs this book. There's a world of people out there who want to be able to make themselves a meal. It's not about making a fancy dinner party, 12 recipes. It's about feeding yourself well, with some style and some flavor. Even if you're in like one of those little apartments with a galley kitchen and the only place you can shop is like the little shop on the corner, and maybe you don't have appliances and the best cookware and stuff, but still, I'm urging everyone, let the barriers come down, get in the kitchen and cook for yourself and your family.
And then the next one, I think 2 years later, was a recipe for cooking.
Yep, and a recipe for cooking is the sort of dinner party cookbook. And I specifically kind of left Chez Panisse out of the first book in order to lower the sort of intimidation factor. But this one, Chez Panisse, comes into it a little. It's more like the food that I made there, or if we were having like, some friends over, or if I just felt like spending the day, which I love to do, in the kitchen, really getting into it. A recipe for cooking is divided by, is seasonal and also by like sort of courses. So like little appetizers, first courses, second courses, and desserts, and also has very, I think, beautiful photographs by a great photographer, Ed Anderson.
And then finally, as I mentioned, the James Beard Award nominated almonds, anchovies, and pancetta.
Yeah, and this one, this actually came about. I was doing an event for the other book, and someone asked me what's next, and I said, I don't really know, but I've always had this dream of a restaurant that would be called Anchovies and Pancetta, because that it would be mostly vegetables, and the only meats that we would have would be anchovies and pancetta, because those are kind of meats that you use as a almost more like a seasoning. You don't eat like a whole lot of them. You just eat a little with your salad or your pasta or your beans or your greens. It's the way people have eaten around the world forever. Stretching a little bit of meat, often cured meat or fish, to flavor a larger amount of like grains or vegetables. And so that was, and then I threw anchovies in there. I mean, almonds as a chapter too, because almonds deliver a similar sort of fat and flavor level, and they're vegetarian. And this book, the other books have a combination of photographs and drawings that were done by myself and my wife and our 3 sons. And this one is just all illustrations done by them too. So all the books, including my next book, are a family project, which has been really great for all of us.
So do you want to tell us about a little bit about that next book? I think you're working on it now, correct?
Yeah. My manuscript is due in October, so that's soon. It's published, same publisher, William Morrow, which is a division of HarperCollins, which is there in New York. And this book is called Bad Food Good, How to Fix Your Kitchen Mistakes and Other Mistakes. And it's about the time, I especially when I was a chef at Chez Panisse, an amazing privilege and access to ingredients. And even now that I'm not the chef, I still, the Bay Area is famous for its foodstuffs. But I started to get a taste when I was traveling and on vacation and visiting with other friends, a taste of like, what do you do if you can't get all that? If you can't get the very best produce and the very best of everything, but you got to eat. And, I always tell people, like I did from the start with 12 recipes, you should try and get better stuff. But in the meantime, you should cook, because you can make delicious things from no matter what you've got. And so this one's about, fixing mistakes, like if you burned a bunch of bread, or you overcooked the pasta or the rice or the meat, here's how to save it. And then there's other chapters that are like how to hack packaged foods into, like if you don't have enough time, you just got to throw something together, but you just can't stand another macaroni and cheese on its own. Here's how to like kind of make it tastier and more, feel a little bit better to eat. There's a chapter about like different sauces that you can use. So if you have something that's not that great, and you just need to kind of juice it up a little bit, there's different sauces. But it's fun because I'm kind of discovering some of that stuff in this book as I cook along. So I'm looking forward to sharing it. I think it'll be out fall of next year.
So Bad Food Good?
Bad Food Good, BFG.
Great. So we'll keep an eye out for that. And so now we know what you've been working on during the pandemic. Have you also been, I mentioned your podcast earlier, Cooking by Ear. Have you been doing episodes of that during the pandemic as well?
I wish we were still producing episodes. We had to go on hiatus because we ran out of money, because it's kind of hard to make money doing a podcast.
Sure.
Since you give it away. We got a little bit of sponsorship, but we kind of ran through that. And but I still get people listen to it, and I get some feedback about that. But in addition to writing the book and doing illustrations, mostly I'm doing some really tiny catering jobs, which are kind of the only kind I like to do. And actually are the only kind that anyone wants now, because nobody's having a big party.
Sure.
So I'll do dinners for like 2 or 4 or 6 people. So those are fun. And then I've been doing some, some like fundraising, like so many of us, and awareness raising with dinners around like getting out the vote. I did a little bit until the shutdown. I was going into San Quentin prison and teaching cooking there to the guys there, which was really satisfying, and I miss it dearly. And also cooking, California has a very large homeless population, so I cook regularly for folks on the street. I make big pots of soup.
That's incredible. Well, I applaud your efforts there, and I know you've on your Instagram you've been mentioning especially the fundraising dinners and what charities you've been fundraising for, so people can check that out. We'll put a link to your website in the description of the video. So now let's talk what you've been cooking during the pandemic. And the reason why your camera is in such an odd position is because we jerry-rigged it, because you're going to do a little cooking demo for us. So I'm very grateful that we figured out a way to do that. So talk about what you've been cooking during the pandemic, and tell us what you're going to make tonight.
Okay. Yeah, the camera is rubber banded to my juicer on top of the fridge. Yeah, so one of the things I did during the pandemic that I think a lot of people did was start a garden in our front yard, dug up some of the grass and put in tomatoes and the season is in full swing here. Summer produce. This is like really when it gets good at the end of the our season will go on for another. Not to brag or make you feel bad, but we're going to have fresh produce for months.
That's fine.
But some of the stuff I'm getting from my garden, and I thought I would make a sort of a take on there's a Middle Eastern bread and tomato salad called Fatoush. It's sort of a cousin of panzanella, which is the Italian version. So I have some ingredients, some of them from my garden, some that I got at the market. But the first thing I'm going to do is make a dressing, and I'm going to make a sort of a tomatoey dressing, and I'm going to include, and I'll hold this up so you can see them. These are green coriander seeds. Like after the cilantro plant goes to seed, it makes these seeds, and they'll eventually turn brown and just be like coriander that you would buy. But when they're green, they have this really interesting flavor. So I'm going to smash up some of these in my mortar and pestle, and I thought it would be kind of good to have the mortar and pestle because then we get a little audio effect. I'm going to put a little clove of garlic in here too, and I always put a pinch of salt when I'm crushing up garlic because it really helps it turn almost like to a liquidy paste. So I'll just do the noisy part quickly here. So with a good stone mortar like this, it doesn't take long, and the salt really helps. So what I got in there is just like a little bit of a paste of the green coriander and the garlic. And then this is a trick that I won't say I invented it, but I came up with it at some point, or I discovered it myself. And it's where you take a tomato and you just grate it on regular box grater like you would use for pasta. I use the big holes. I cut the tomato like on the equator, and you leave the skin, you leave the seeds, everything, and you just grate it, and you get this like juicy, pulpy result, and the skin doesn't go through. You can really push right down, and the skin just, I don't know, it just like, I guess it's strong enough to not really go through. These are not tomatoes I grew. These are dry farmed early girl tomatoes, which seem to be the most consistently flavorful. So I got a little juice in there that's like pulpy, like I said, pulpy tomato juice. That's the base of the vinaigrette. I'm going to add a little more salt, and then a little bit of lemon juice. I always just squeeze it through my fingers to strain out the seeds. A little lemon juice, a little bit of red wine vinegar, which I actually make from on the rare occasion when there's a little bottle of wine left over or half a bottle. I save that and I make vinegar. Here I have like a starter. So garlic, coriander, tomato, vinegar, lemon juice, and then some nice olive oil. This comes from up north from a native reservation where they have a casino, but they also make olive oil. So I can't support them by going to the casino because I'm not a casino guy, but I do like olive oil, and it's really good. It's called Seca Hills. And as you can see, I'm not measuring anything, but I just kind of eyeball it. And then, so that's like my nice tomatoey dressing. And I'm going to do, I don't want to break my one unbreakable rule, which is that you always have to taste the best way to know how something is to just go ahead and taste it. And then I'm just going to assemble the salad. And I have certain ingredients, but you could substitute other things. If you didn't have one or two of them, that would be fine. So I'm going to start with some diced up tomatoes, diced up cucumbers. I have sliced up a little red pepper. These are these really cool peppers that they have this time of year called Jimmy Nardello. They have a good name too. Sort of gangstery. And I like to roast them whole, but they're nice sliced up. So I'm going to put some of those in there. A little bit of green onions that I chopped up earlier. And then I have mint and cilantro. You could use basil, parsley, throw that in. And last, some of this I did grow myself. I have this really great mustard green called Ruby Streaks, and a little bit of arugula, and a little chopped up romaine that I'll add in there. And then ordinarily you would also add bread, and in the Middle East it would be like pita bread that you sort of toast. But the other day I discovered I had the end of it. You know, like when you eat a bag of tortilla chips, and at the end there's the ones that are way too small to dip into the guacamole, and you kind of don't know what to do with them.
I have a half bag sitting in my kitchen and I don't know what to do with it. So tell me what you're just going to
here you
throw
go.
them in.
Well, one thing that they're good to do is to mix into scrambled eggs.
Oh.
It's really good breakfast. But another thing is you can use them like kind of wherever you would use like croutons or dried bread. So a little bit of the pieces of tortilla chips. I'm going to add a touch more salt for the tomatoes and the cucumbers. And then the last ingredient is sumac, which is a spice that's derived from this plant that actually used to grow in New Jersey. I don't know. I guess it grows in New England. It has these like red berries, and it has a beautiful color and a sort of lemony flavor. And then you just toss it all together, and on goes the vinaigrette. And here's where you're glad you have like, not just an oily vinaigrette, but also it has that tomato juice, because it sort of, it makes it so the tortilla chips get kind of like, they're still crispy, but they start to get kind of chewy and they change while you eat it. And also, this is a beautiful salad. Check it out.
It's beautiful. That's a great idea. I mean,
it's got everything. And, like I said, if you can substitute, if you just have if you had iceberg lettuce, you could put that in. If you have bell peppers. So yeah, Fatoush made with tortilla chips.
That's a great, quick and easy recipe. Thank you so much for showing that, and thank you for jerry-rigging the camera to make that happen.
Sure.
As my tech director, who is invisible on this call, knows, I'm a huge Fatoush fan and a huge sumac fan, and he once bought me a massive bag of sumac. So it's
awesome.
definitely
I'm gonna take a bite.
One of my favorites. Let's see how to come out.
No.
I'll have you pack that nice and send it my way to New York.
I know. I wish you guys could share it with me.
I know.
So
well, another thing you wanted to share was some of the art around your house. That's both your art and some other art. So let's take this down off the rig and take us for a quick little tour.
So first, I'll show you. These are illustrations from. I think these are from almonds, anchovies, and pancetta. Mm-hmm. I did some, and so did my wife and kids. Those hang in the kitchen. There's the beautiful California day. A couple more pancetta and eggplant. Those are from the book as well. There's a cucumber. But then my wife works at this amazing Center for Adult Artists with Disabilities called Creative Growth. It's in Oakland. There's a lot of reflection on that one, but this one is by an artist named Ron Veazey, who is a great painter who's making all these paintings of South African photographers. Mm-hmm. This one is actually by my son, Milo. That is one that my wife and son did back in the day, stories that they loved. Hopefully the lighting will be okay here. These are two drawings that are by my wife, Kathleen Henderson. Yeah, the light's not so great, huh? You might have to.
Well, I definitely think we can see them pretty well. So.
Okay. She shows at a gallery called Track 16 in LA. If any LA listeners are watching, and then there's my little dog Benny. Yeah. But then there's more. These are mostly creative growth. An amazing artist named Olga Bielma. There's another one of Kathleen's pieces. That's a creative growth piece. One of my most prized ones is this Danny Miller, amazing artist who does this sort of automatic drawing that often has text. That one is another creative growth artist named John John Martin. There's a little painting by my son, Milo. And then, yeah, I think that's about it.
So are all three of your sons artists as well, or?
Well, my oldest son, Henderson, went to Cooper Union for art, and he is a painter, and then he did graduate work at Rutgers, and yeah, is still painting and cooking. He's actually, he's sort of taken a piece from both his mom and dad, you know, paints, but also makes a living as a cook. He's in Martha's Vineyard right now, cooking as a private chef.
Great.
And then Milo, who's 25, is living in New York and working as works in a cafe and a teacher, although those have closed. But he makes music and makes art as well. And then our youngest son is a junior in high school, and he doesn't really make art unless I ask him to make a illustration for me, and then he does a really great job, actually.
So everyone's an artist in some sense of the word, or even if they don't want to be just yet. But so you know, we actually have several SVA alumni who, you know, originally went to SVA for visual art of one type or another, whether it be painting or film or whatever the case may be. But they, like you, have transitioned into the culinary arts field. I mean, one of them has a restaurant right behind our SVA theater. Jim Leahy is the chef and owner of Sullivan Street Bakery. And there are several others throughout the country, but I'd love for you to offer some advice to someone who might be wanting to transition from one career to the other and pursuing a food and culinary arts job.
Yeah. Well, you know, the thing for me, I felt like, you know, people often say, like, I say, you know, I went to art school, but I don't really make art anymore. And they were like, yes, you do, you cook, and it's so artful. And I agree that it's artful and it's informed by like the visual language and sensibility that I got, you know, studying and being an artist at SVA. But I don't really consider what I do to be art. I just feel like it's a highly developed craft, and I'm fine with that. Having said that, you know, my advice would be, honestly, I can't advise anyone to go to cooking school. I think it's, I think you're better off learning on the job. I mean, that's what I did, and so I guess I'm biased. But cooking schools can be really expensive, and that can kind of put you in a hole. So my recommendation would be, you know, intern if you can at restaurants that you love. Like, go to the restaurants that you really like, and just be persistent and say, hey, can I come and, you know, cook with you guys to learn? And you know, work your way up, pay attention, cook all the time at home. That's my number one thing. And I enjoy it, but if someone's gonna consider making that change, they must enjoy it too. So yeah, that's what helped me.
Well, I think that a lot of us are cooking at home right now. So, so that's definitely been some inspiration and motivation and help for many of us who are trying to get through the day right now. I personally feel like I hadn't been cooking for a long time, and now really I've been doing it pretty much every night, and still supporting the restaurants in the area, which I think is important to do as well. So
yeah, I mean, I always feel like, for me, like in a time like now where so many of us have like these really unstructured days where, you know, it's like you're not really sure what you have to do. Like, you don't have to go to work at a certain time and all that. That having like the structure of meals and sort of cooking, I like to think of it like cooking serially, like you're making the beans today and you're going to eat some today, but you know that tomorrow you'll use those in that other pasta and it'll go with that other thing. And just like that kind of thing always really helps me stay kind of sane, that I know I have something going, something in the works.
Yeah, I think it's very true, and I completely agree with you. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Cal,
Yeah,
and thank you also for the work that you're doing with those charities. As I mentioned, we'll put your website and your Instagram in the description of this video so people can check out the work that you've been doing. Thank you also for showing us your home and your
yeah,
art, and for that terrific recipe. And please stay in touch. We'll keep an eye out for your cookbook next year,
yeah.
and we hope to hear more from you soon.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been
Thanks,
fun.
Cal. Be
All
well.
right. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this Q&A and hope you'll check out our other after-school special videos on the School of Visual Arts' YouTube channel. Thank you for your interest in and support of SVA and its alumni, and for your support of the arts in general. Stay safe, stay healthy, and be well.